Chapter 7: Deviance, Crime, and Social Control. For Chapter 7, we are going to talk about deviance, social control, law and society, sociological perspectives on deviance, and crime. What is deviance? Deviance is a behavior that violates the standards of conduct or expectations of a group or society. So it's someone that is radical and going outside the norm. It's somebody that is violating the law. Even though everyone doesn't break the law when it comes to deviance, there's still social stigma. And those are labels society uses to devalue members of certain social groups. So sometimes with stigma, those with mental illnesses get a bad rap. Or those who look genetically different. When it comes to technology, there could be deviance because there are hackers. Data is breached continuously. Identities are stolen. There's just a lot with technology that can cause deviance. When you think of social control, just think of social norms or punishments, sanctions, rules, laws. Conformity and obedience. So Stanley Milgram was a psychologist, and he tested people using conformity and obedience. He wanted to know if people would follow someone in a white coat, even if it meant hurting someone else. So when the participants who were answering the questions got anything wrong, then the person in the white coat would tell the volunteer that you have to keep shocking them and shocking them. And what Milgram ended up finding is that people conform all the time, especially if it's someone that they feel is of authority or someone that they should obey. There are two types of social control, informal and formal. So informal social control is used to enforce the norm. So if someone does something, then people will laugh or they will smile, and then it'll let anyone who's new to the situation know that the current behavior is okay. People will raise their eyebrows if they're curious about something or unsure, or maybe something surprising. And there's also ridicule as far as punishment of keeping people in line. And then there's formal social control, which is carried out by authorized agents, and that would be the government or police officers. And informal social control can undermine formal norms, encouraging people to violate social norms. Law and society. Some norms are so important to a society that they are formalized into laws. Like there are some laws that say that you can't spit in public. It just depends on the state. And we have the control theory, and that's basically saying that when you're connected as a society, it leads people to basically conform. Humans are not meant to be alone, and we strive to be liked and to belong, so therefore we will conform. Merton's deviance theory, and that is on page 153 of your text. So we have this table here. So we have the conformist, which is the non-deviant. So they accept both the goals of society and the use of acceptable means. So they completely conform to whatever the status quo is. A retreatist withdraws from the goals of society and the use of acceptable means to achieve them. So they'll retreat, maybe go off the grid. An innovator accepts the goals of society, but pursues them with means considered improper. So it's somebody that's basically making their own rules. A ritualist abandons the goals but becomes compulsively committed to the institutional means. So that could be somebody that's completely by the book. And then rebel feels alienated from both the goals of society and the dominant means of achieving them. This person is completely going to go against the grain. From the interactionist perspective, we have cultural transmission. And if somebody is in a culture or an environment where there is a lot of violence or gang activity, then the person will think that that type of behavior is okay. They'll basically do what they see. And then differential association is a process through which exposure to attitudes favorable to criminal acts leads to the violation of the rules. So if people continuously see people committing crime, then their attitudes toward the crime isn't so bad anymore. It's just something that they see maybe weekly. So therefore, they're more likely to be okay with crime. They're more likely to commit crimes. The social disorganization theory focuses on the fact that there's been a breakdown in our society as far as people knowing each other in neighborhoods, government, family, schools, and churches. However, some people don't like this because it feels like the victims of the situations are being blamed for factors that determine the rate of crime that they're exposed to. Labeling theory attempts to explain why some people are viewed as deviants while others engaged in the same behavior are not. It just depends on society and what society deems as normal. One kid might get in trouble for doing the same act as another kid, or even one adult will get in trouble for doing the same act as another, and it just depends on society and law enforcement and how they choose to enforce those rules. So the labeling theory focuses on police, probation officers, psychiatrists, judges, teachers, employers, school officials, and other regulators of social control. So these people play a significant role in creating deviant identity. So sometimes if a kid is acting out in school and they go to see the psychologist or the psychiatrist on campus, and then the psychiatrist just says, oh, they're a bad kid, or doesn't even try to help them, and maybe calls a police officer to come arrest the child, and maybe the child was just crying or acting up a little bit and they're 10 years old. So the more people are being labeled, the more they're going to act out in that behavior. And these agents of social control are the people that are sort of like the gatekeepers. I'm sure you've heard of the school to prison pipeline, and kids getting in trouble for crying or maybe having a small tantrum, as all kids do. Getting law enforcement involved or pressing charges against them is part of the problem when it comes to the school to prison pipeline. I don't know if you guys heard, there were some stories of 6-year-olds that were arrested for literally throwing a tantrum. One child ended up kicking a teacher in the leg while throwing the tantrum, but law enforcement ended up being involved. And that situation is just really sad to think that 6-year-olds having tantrums could be exposed to things like that, which would cause an issue on their record and introduce them to maybe a part of society that they should never be a part of. The conflict perspective contends that people of power will protect their own interests and they'll define deviance to suit their needs. So as we hear the names or the phrases white collar crimes, and it's basically people stealing from companies sometimes, but they do it in such a large manner, and because they're rich, it's looked at as white collar. However, if a regular person or a poor person goes and steals money from a drugstore or a gas station, then they'll have jail time and face more charges and be looked at negatively versus the person with a white collar crime, but they did the same act of stealing. So the entire criminal justice system in the United States treats suspects differently based on race, ethnicity, or social class. And there are all sorts of examples of that. And for the discussion this week, we're going to read about Centoya Brown. For the feminist perspective, these psychologists believe that these approaches were only developed for men, and they didn't take into context women and women's thoughts and women's concerns and women's exposures to different types of deviant behaviors. This table compares the sociological perspectives on deviance from functionalist, interactionist, conflict, and then feminist. Crime. So it's a violation of the law, and there are penalties involved. So there's several different types of crimes, and victimless crimes are basically when the person engaged in the act with someone else is willing. So that could be like prostitution or buying and taking drugs. Professional crime would be like a career criminal. This person basically is a criminal every day. They're thinking of new things and honing new skills in order to improve. their career as a criminal. We have organized crime, and that's when a group of people work together to be involved in illegal activities and criminal enterprises, and that could do with gambling and smuggling of drugs. We have white collar and technology based crimes, and those are basically for people that are deemed respectable, affluent, basically rich, and they commit illegal acts, and that could be like embezzling money. Hate crimes are crimes against people based on their religion, ethnic group, national origin, sexual orientation, race, and if it can show that the person meant to commit the crime. It shows that their hatred was part of why they committed the crime against this group of people. Now we have the Hate Crime Statistics Act, and that's a national mandate that basically says the states need to identify crimes based on race, religion, ethnic group, and national origin. And now we have more things added to the list, like disabilities, mental and physical, and sexual orientation. And then transnational crimes are crimes that occur across multiple borders, and that could be like slavery or smuggling drugs in and out of countries. As I explained in the last slide, we have victimless crimes and professional crimes. Organized crime, white collar crime, and cyber crimes. Cyber crimes that use computer hardware and software. We have a corporate crime, any act by a corporation that is punishable by the government. On this line, as previously mentioned, we have hate crimes, and that's based on the victim's race, religion, ethnic group, national origin, sexual orientation. It could include gender. It could include disability. And hate crimes over the last couple of years are continuing to rise nationwide in the U.S., sadly. Now this table is from 2014, so I believe maybe some of these might have changed a little bit, but race would still be the largest categorization reported for hate crimes. I believe religion has increased. And as previously mentioned, we have transnational crime, and that's across multiple borders. It spans the globe, or it could span the globe. I mentioned slavery and smuggling of drugs. They could smuggle people. So people can be trafficked, endangered species, drugs, art, antiques. This table is a list of different types of transnational crime. So things that weren't mentioned before, sea piracy, yes, that's still a thing. Illegal sales of firearms and ammunition, money laundering, skyjacking, bankruptcy, terrorism, trafficking, illegal organ transplants, body parts, theft of cultural objects. So with the index crimes and victimization surveys, the FBI tracks different types of crime. So violent crimes that they track are murder, rape, robbery, and assault. And then property crimes would be burglary, larceny, theft, motor vehicle theft, and arson. However, a lot of crimes are not reported all the time to law enforcement. So whenever it comes to numbers or things listed, usually believe that the numbers will be larger if everyone was actually able to report it. We just don't know the various reasons why people don't report things. And then we have victimization surveys. So surveys of ordinary people to determine whether they have been victims of a crime.